Good day everyone. So my name is Eileen and Bogahon, and today I'm going to share and discuss the topics that was assigned to me. So I have three topics, but the first one that I am going to share is about the fike net. So what is fike net? So a fike net is a type of fish trap. It consists of long cylindrical netting bag, usually with several netting cones fitted inside the netting cylinder to make entry easy and exit difficult. So this net is then mounted on rigid rings or other rigid framework and fixed on the seabed by anchors, ballast, or stakes. It also has wings or leaders to help guide the fish towards the entrance of the bag, and they are commonly used to in estuaries or inshore shallow water. So which means that um, a fike net is a sort of catch and release fish trap, and it is made up of a long cylindrical bag with multiple netting cones attached inside to make entry and escape easier and more difficult. So environmental impact. So what is the environmental impact of fike net? So very little environmental impact with this gear, as it is usually done on a small scale, and the only seabed impact would be the interaction between the stakes or anchors with the seabed. These are usually in areas or fairly mobile seabeds, being tidal or intertidal, where any impact is quickly dissipated by the tidal movements. Bycatch is minimal, and any unwanted bycatch can usually be released alive. So which means that because this gear is normally used on a small scale, um, it has very little environmental impact, and the interaction of the stakes or anchors with the sea floor would be the only impact on the seabed. And these are frequently found in the tidal or intertidal environments with relatively mobile seabeds, where any influence is soon dispersed by tidal movements. So as mentioned earlier, bycatch is minimal, and any unwanted bycatch can usually be released alive. So which means that bycatch is extremely rare. So it is very rare, and in any undesirable bycatch is usually released alive. So now let's proceed to the this question. So how do you make a flight net? So how do we make a flight net? So the standard fike net design consists of a cylinder of netting wrapped around a series of hoops to create a trap, and fish enter through the mouth of the trap and retained by a series of funnel-shaped throats. One or one or more trap fish enter through the mouth of the trap and are retained by a series of funnel shaped throats. One or more leaders or wings are attached to the mouth and are used to direct fish into the fike net. So, which means that a cylinder of netting is wrapped around a number of hoops to construct a trap in the classic fike net design. And the fish enter the trap through the mouth and are held in place by a series of funnel-shaped throats. And fish are guided into the fike net by one or more leaders or wings attached to the mouth. So now let's proceed to the advantages and disadvantages of fike netting. So first we have here is the advantages of fike netting. So it can be relatively easily set in complex habitat types such as dense aquatic vegetation or amongst coarse woody debris. In this respect, fike nets are better than gill nets, but not as good as minnow traps. So it can be fike netting is can be placed in a variety of challenging habitats such as dense aquatic vegetation or among coarse woody debris with considerable ease. And in this regard, fike nets outperform gill nets but fall short of minnow traps. So it is less selective for fish species and sizes than gill nets or minnow traps. However, the size of mesh and funnel openings will determine the minimum and maximum sizes of fish caught. So gill nets and minnow traps are more discriminating for fish kinds and sizes, the size of the mesh and funnel apertures. Or on the other hand, it will define the minimum and maximum fish sizes captured. So, large net and capture capacity, which collapses to small, flat, compact size. So, um, large catch and net capacity that folds into a small, flat, compact size. So, it is one of the advantages of pike netting, and results in far less fish mortality and injury compared with gill nets, and most fish can be released. So it is very efficient way to I mean when compared to gill nets, there is significantly less fish death and injury, and most fish can be released, no, in pike netting, and results in far less fish mortality and injury compared with gill nets, and most fish can be released. The next one is the presents less risk to diving birds and gel nets. So gill nets pose a greater risk to diving birds. The next is it is a highly efficient method for sampling eel species, particularly if baited. So it is very efficient way to sample eel species, especially if baited. So it is effective for catching fish during migratory movement. Double-winged fikes can also be used to determine the direction of movement. For example, between a river and associated floodplain wetlands. So, which means that when catching fish during migratory movements, this method, which is the fike netting, works very well. And double wing fikes can also be used to detect movements directions, such as between a river and its floodplain wetlands. So now let's proceed to its disadvantages of fike netting. Wait. So first is they can be difficult to set in deep water or at sites with uneven or steeply sloping substrates. So, which means that in deep water or any sites with uneven or steeply sloping substrates, they can be challenging to install. So, installing fike net is very difficult or very challenging in deep water. Wait. So so the second one is predation can occur inside the nets, and this is likely to be significant issue with eels in New Zealand. Predation can affect recorded capture rates of smaller fish, which are either eaten or actively avoid entering nets containing predators. And predation will also influence um, the contents of predator stomachs, and this should be taken into account if fike net catches are used in diet studies. So, which means that predation can one of the disadvantages in fike netting is that predation will occur. No, predation can occur when the nets within the nets. So, and eels in New Zealand are likely to face this problem. So, predation can have um, predation can have an impact on recorded capture rates or of smaller fish, which are either eaten or actively avoid entering predator-infested nets. And predation has an effect on the contents of predator stomachs, which should be considered when using pike net catches in diet research. So now, the third one is they can be difficult to set in strong currents, as they tend to accumulate the debris or will not set properly. However, pike netting is more conducive to sampling in current than gill nets. So in 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 high currents, they might be difficult to set the pike net, because they tend to collect debris or not be set properly. And pike netting, on the other hand, it is better for sampling in currents than gill nets. And there is a bias towards cover-seeking mobile species, benthic species, and larger fish species. So, which means that cover-seeking mobile species, benthic species, and larger fish species are favored. And catch rates are generally lower than those for gill nets. So, the catch rates for gill nets are often lower. And then catch rate variability is often high, which means that relatively large numbers of sets are required or to detect change in relative abundance. So which means that because catch rate variability is frequently substantial, large numbers of sets are needed to detect changes in relative abundance. So now, since we are finished about the pike net, let's proceed to the hoop net. So what is hoop net? Hoop nets, also known as pike or barrel nets, and have been used for centuries to catch fish. So hoop net, it is being used now for centuries in catching fishes, and made up of long tube of netting and held open with large metal or fiberglass hoops. The net contains two inward-facing mesh funnels. These files allow fish to enter the net but not to leave. So, and the fisherman can retrieve the net, open the end, and empty the fish out of the net. So, hoop net, as I've mentioned earlier, the net comprises two inwards facing mesh funnels, and it is made a long tube of netting held open by huge metal or fiberglass hoops, and fish can enter but not exit, no? So which means that fish can enter inside the hoop net, but they cannot exit the net using these files. And after that, the fisherman can recover the net, open the end of the net, and empty the fish into it. And different regions have different laws regarding the use of hoop nets. Also, hoop nets may be allowed in one area of the waterway but not in others. So check with your local and state fishing game service before using a hoop net, especially in public lands. When baiting the hoop net, it is important to use bait that will last for a period of time, allowing the net to soak long enough for the fish to find it. Cotton seed tubes make excellent bait but for scaled fish, while compressed soybean meal and cheese baits work well for catfish, buffalo, and carp. So the use of hoop nets is governed by different rules in different regions. So hoop nets may also be permitted in some areas of the river but not others. And before utilizing a hoop net on public lands, um, you should check with your local and state fishing game service, and it's critical to select bait with that will last for a long time while baiting the hoop net, allowing the net to soak long enough for the fish to find it. And cottonseed cubes work well for scaled fish, while compressed soybean meal and cheese baits are effective for catfish, buffalo, and carp, as mentioned earlier. So now, we have this. Next slide. Hoop nets come in a range of sizes and mesh diameters. For catching bait fish, select smaller hoop nets with netting meshes of 1 inch or less. For larger net fish, use a bigger hoop net with a mesh diameter of 1 1/2 inches or better. And this larger mesh size will allow smaller bait fish to pass the net while capturing larger fish. So, which means that hoop nets are available in various sizes and mesh diameters. And we need to, in choosing smaller hoop nets with netting meshes of 1 inch or less for catching bait fish. And so which means that in catching bait fish, we need to choose the smaller one, the smaller hoop nets, and um, use a larger. Let's use the large one, the larger hoop net with a mesh diameter of 1 1/2 inches or more for larger fish, and smaller bait fish will be able to pass through the net while larger fish will be caught. So now, next slide. To set a hoop net, tie the tapered end of the net to a stake set well in the river bottom to prevent the net from being washed away. Once secured, pull the mouth of the net away from the stake or allow the current to carry the body of the net downstream, and ensure that the mouth of the net is open and anchor from being washed into the net. And mark the location with a float of buoy from easier identification and retrieval. So, which means that to prevent a hoop net from being swept away, we need to connect that tapering end of the net to a post planted deep in the riverbed. And we need to pull the mouth of the net away from the stake once it's been fastened, and or let the current carry the net's body downstream, and ensure the net's mouth is open and that is properly anchored, and leaves, branches, and other debris will not be washed into the net if you stand in this position. And a float or buoy can be used to mark the site for easier identification and retrieval. So, when harvesting fish from a hoop net, raise the tapered and raise the tapered end first. Roll them over the side of the boat until all of the fish are in the boat. Until the tapered over end and empty the net. Avoid bringing the entire net into the boat to make for easier resetting. Excuse me. So, if you are um, so raise the tapered end of the hoop net first for the harvesting fish, and roll the net over the side of the boat until it is completely full of fish. And then unite the tapering end of the net and empty it. And to make reseating easier, dapat dili nato kanang ihurot o tibuok nga net yani di nato dapat kanang ibutang sa panang boat, kay para mas madali ang pag set up o balik. So When resetting your net, ensure that there is sufficient bait in the net first. If necessary, add more. Place the net back in the same location. Fish in the region will become conditioned to finding food in this area, and a net placed in the same location will frequently catch more fish than if it were relocated. So, which means that if you're resetting your net, if we are resetting our net, make sure that there's enough bait in it first and add more if necessary, and replace the net in its original location. So let's put the net in the original location, and fish in the area will develop accustomed to finding food in this area or in this location, and a net placed in the same spot will often catch more fish than if it were moved. So now, let's proceed to the pelagic trawls. So the trawl is spread horizontally by a set of pelagic trawl doors. The horizontal opening is dictated by a clamp weight on the lower wing ends of the net and the ringing of the bridles between the net and trawl doors. So, which means that a set of pelagic trawl doors spreads the trawl horizontally, and a clamp weight on the lower wing ends of the net and the rigging of the bridles between the net and trawl doors determine the horizontal opening. And then, by altering the vessel's speed and or changing the length of trawl wrap between the vessel and the trawl doors, the position of the net in the water column can be altered to suit the depth where the shoal of fish are swimming at. And the nets can be very large, as big as 200 meters wide and 150 meters deep, but the mesh size in the mouth of the trawl are huge, something as big as 50 meters long. So, the location of the net in the water column can be adjusted by modifying the vessel speed and or the length of trawl warp between the vessel and the trawl doors to suit the depth where the shoal of fish is swimming. And the nets can be as large as 200 meters wide and 150 meters deep, while the mesh size in the trawl's mouth can be as large as 50 meters long. So, its environmental impact. So, the environmental impact of pelagic trawl. So, as all pelagic trawl are towed in mid-water with no intentional contact with the seabed, there should be a negligible impact on the seabed environment. Very occasionally, the gear may be towed very close to the seabed when there may the odd time that the wing and weights and shoal doors contact the seabed, but this will be the exception rather than the rule. Usually, the skipper is very careful not to allow his gear to get too close to the seabed, because these trawls will damage easily if it will come into contact with the seabed. So there should be minimal influence on the seabed environment, because all the pelagic trawls are towed in mid-water with no intentional contact with the seabed, and the gear may be dragged very near to the seabed on rare occasions, and the wing and weights and shoal doors may come into contact with the seafloor, although this will be the exception rather than the rule. And the skipper usually takes great care not to let his gear to approach too close to the seabed, and as these trolls are readily damaged if they come into contact with it. So, what do pelagic trollers catch? So may gina-catch sa pelagic troll. So, midwater trolling catches pelagic fish such as anchovies, shrimp, tuna, and mackerel, whereas bottom trolling targets both bottom living fish, groundfish, and semi-pelagic fish such as cod, squid, halibut, and rockfish. So, pelagic trolls, the bottom catches both bottom trolling catches both bottom living species, groundfish, and semi-pelagic fish like cod, squid, halibut. So, ang mga makatch sa pelagic trollers, sa pelagic troll is katong mga anchovies, shrimp, tuna, and mackerel. Kana mga gitang mention nga fish diha, fishes. Then, so, is pelagic trolling sustainable? So, sustainable ba ang pelagic trolling? So, pelagic trolls are very good at being species-specific in operation. The large meshes in the mouth of the troll will only herd shoaling species into the troll. So, which means that pelagic trolls excel at being species-specific while in use. And only shoaling species will be herded into the troll by the huge meshes in the mouth. So, I think, so how does a pelagic troller work? So, pelagic or midwater trolls have a cone-shaped body and a closed cod end that holds their catch. Acoustic technology is used to locate the position and depth of the target fish and the path of the boats, and trolls are adjusted accordingly. Midwater trolls have no contact with seabed. So, troll for pelagic fish. So, pelagic trolls, also known as midwater trolls, have a cone-shaped body with a closed cod end that holds the catch. And the target fish, position and depths are determined using acoustic technology. So, na siya gigamit nga technology. And the boats and the troll spots are modified accordingly. Trolls in the middle of the ocean have no contact with the seabed. So, I think that's all. So, thank you. So, now let's proceed to the next topic. That will be shared or discussed by my classmate.